want talks with them.
What is the point of talking now?
Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest. We continue to monitor the government in crisis. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed.
That's what it's all about.
Max Foster, CNN.
I'm Larry Madowo in Kilifi, Kenya, and this is CNN.
To Russian territory. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. Wolf Blitzer is off today. I'm Jim Acosta, and this is a Situation Room special report. And we begin this hour with a disturbing new audio recording that's adding to the outrage over the police response to the Texas school massacre. CNN's Adrian Broadus is following all of the new developments for us in Uvalde, Texas. Adrian, what can you tell us?
We're now getting our first glimpse at some of the information relayed to officers outside Robb Elementary School as a massacre was unfolding on the inside. ABC News obtained a portion of video that appears to be audio from one 911 operator relaying information from a child inside the classroom.
You have a child online. Child is advising he is in the room full of victims.
CNN has not been able to independently confirm the audio or at what point in the incident it was heard. On Friday, the Texas Public Safety Director said there were at least 8 911 calls from 2 callers in the school pleading for help. Investigators now say 19 officers waited outside the classroom where the gunman was for about 50 minutes until a Customs and Border Patrol team decided to go in without direct orders. That's according to Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez.
What's been made clear to me is that at that point, the CBP team that went in frustration said, we're going in.
The Justice Department now says it will review the law enforcement response, which Texas officials say deviated from active shooter protocols.
Had they gotten there sooner and somebody would have taken immediate action, we might have more of those children here today, including my daughter.
Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez said President Biden told him that Robb Elementary School would possibly be razed and rebuilt. Gutierrez says there is a federal grant process for schools where there have been mass shootings.
What kind of world are we living in that legislation was created for raising these schools?
For too many Uvalde parents, those questions coming too late.
No matter who is held responsible, it's not going to bring my daughter back.
This is how those who love 10-year-old Amerie Jo Garza will remember her. A decade of photos showing a happy girl with a sweet smile, described by family as sassy, funny, and a little diva who hated wearing dresses. Memories of happier times as her family, friends, and community say goodbye during visitation and a rosary service.
It brings me joy to know that I got an opportunity to have such a great daughter, and I tried to be the best father that I could be.
Just down the road, another grieving family says goodbye to Maite Rodriguez, also 10 years old.
I love her, that I miss her, that I'm proud of her. She wanted to be a marine biologist before she could even say the word. She loved animals.
She had so much potential. That was Maite's cousin who spoke with us. And she also shared that Maite's classmates called her a hero. They said she was brave. When the shooting started, she told the other classmates where to hide, and she helped them hide moments before the shooter entered the room. Jim?
All right, Adrian Broadus, thank you very much for that report. Let's get more on the Justice Department's investigation of the police response to the school shooting. We're joined now by CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez. Evan, what are you learning about this investigation?
Well, Jim, this is an investigation that's going to be handled by some outside experts that the Justice Department is going to bring in. The mayor requested this. That was an important step for this what's going to be an independent accounting of what happened that day. The hope from the Justice Department folks is that this is going to provide some answers, perhaps some best practices, perhaps changes in police protocols, so that as we did with Columbine and some of the past shootings, police can learn some things perhaps for the next one, because we know in this country, unfortunately, we keep having these incidents. And what we expect is that these people are going to go and to Uvalde. They're going to interview some of the first responders. Hundreds of people perhaps will be interviewed. If they can, they'll talk to some of the survivors, family members, some of the people you saw outside that school trying to urge police officers to go in. At the end of all of this, the Justice Department is going to publish a report. That'll probably take a few months. I'll read you just a part of what they say they're trying to accomplish here. They say the goal of the review is to provide an independent account of law enforcement actions and responses that day and identify lessons learned and best practices to help first responders prepare for and respond to active shooter events. This is something, unfortunately, we know they have to prepare for because they keep happening around the country.
They absolutely keep happening, and it's time to get something done about this. Evan Perez, thank you very much. There's a lot to discuss now with our experts, senior law enforcement analyst Charles Ramsey, counterterrorism analyst Phil Mudd, and senior legal analyst Elie Honig. Gentlemen, thanks to all of you. We appreciate you coming on. Phil, you hear that apparent dispatch audio. In the audio, you hear, quote, child is advising he is in the room full of victims. If officers knew that, is there any explanation for the delay in charging this gunman? I mean, what we were told late last week was they thought that this was just a barricaded person situation and that there weren't any folks still alive inside, or at least that was an impression they were going with at the time. This seems to negate that.
I agree. I think I'm going to give you two answers. One as a citizen and one as a former professional. As a citizen, you look at this and say, there can be no explanation, and stop. As a professional, thinking about the Department of Justice team going in there, reviewing video, reviewing the dispatch transcripts, talking to, obviously, the people involved, the officers, the witnesses, you've got to go in cold, answering the question of why. Clearly, and the police have already said this, a mistake was made. Were there crossed lines of communication? Did everybody have different ideas of what was happening in that room? Did some of the officers say, I'm getting different information that suggests there are no students in that room? As a citizen, I want to say the officers are to blame. That is too fast to judgment. As a professional, I want to go in and say there's a problem with protocols that allow an officer not to storm that room. How do we change that protocols? And Jim, the only way to do that is to go in, do the interviews, and do the report. And that's going to take a couple of months.
Yeah. And Chief Ramsey, it's unclear there was ever a command to breach the classroom. A Texas state senator says Border Patrol agents made this call to go in out of frustration. How far is this from what officers are trained to do in this type of situation?
Well, one, I wish they had done it 15 minutes earlier. I mean, you know, the active shooter training, you don't wait to be ordered into a building. That's the whole point of it. When you arrive at the scene, you go in, you engage the suspect, you incapacitate him, you kill him, you do whatever you have to do to stop the killing, period. That's all. So what they were doing for that hour and some odd minutes, I have absolutely no idea. One question that I had was whether or not dispatch let them know what was going on, and now that's been answered. But even if they had not told them what was going on, that's still no excuse not to go into that classroom. You have people that are shot, they're laying there, they're wounded. I'm certain that some of those kids probably bled to death. There is absolutely no excuse for not entering that classroom. The protocols are there, they just didn't follow them.
Elie, as you heard, the Justice Department is going to investigate. How will this work, and how can the Justice Department deliver some sense of justice to these families? I mean, I can't imagine, looking at this after the fact is going to do a whole lot for them.
Yeah, Jim, well, DOJ, I'm sure, is keenly aware they can never undo what's been done. The best they can do is give us some answers. And it's entirely right and appropriate that DOJ do this investigation. First of all, DOJ has resources and expertise far beyond what local and state law enforcement would have. All due respect to state and local law enforcement, DOJ has the entire FBI, ATF, marshals, and they're bringing in outside experts. But even more importantly, DOJ has integrity, independence, and credibility that I think local and state law enforcement officials in Texas have given away. They have given us statements that have been incorrect, inconsistent, and not at all transparent. And so we need DOJ to go in there to give us answers in a way that the American public can believe and accept.
Right, because we didn't get any straight answers last week. I mean, they were all contradicted by answers we got later on in the week. Ellie, do you see this resulting in charges potentially? Could it reach that level?
Well, Jim, it's very, very rare to see police officers charged with crimes based on their emergency response. Really, the only situation we've seen where someone has been charged was in the Parkland, Florida shooting, where a school security guard was charged with child endangerment and other crimes. Now, that case is still pending, hasn't even gone to trial yet. It's set for trial this fall. Now, Texas has some laws that are similar, not identical, but similar to the law in Florida. Texas has child neglect laws and child abandonment laws. But it's going to be tricky for prosecutors here. They're going to have to show that law enforcement under Texas law placed the children in danger. There's an argument as to what does that mean to place a child in danger, but it's going to turn on the very nuances of the facts, and that's why every fact, every moment that DOJ is going to uncover will be critical here.
Phil, do you expect this Department of Justice report to definitively tell us whether this delay cost victims their lives?
No, I think the first.
Well, I think it'll give us minute by minute, second by second blow.
Oh.
Going to Phil on that one, Ellie. Hang on.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think so. I think the first responsibility of the report is to explain what we can do in the future. Let me give you one word: protocol. I'm going to judge that the officers involved in this are going to have some questions about whether they thought, as we've heard, the individual was barricaded. That is, whether they thought this was a live shooter situation. The primary thing I'm looking from the report, Jim, would be to tell to officers in the future in terms of protocol and training. If you have any doubt, if you suspect the individual is barricaded but you do not know, you don't have an option. If there's any doubt, move now, save a kid. That's what I'd be looking for, Jim.
And Chief Ramsey, the Justice Department conducted similar reviews after the mass shootings in San Bernardino and at the Pulse nightclub. But is the problem ultimately this easy access to these high-powered weapons? I mean, they just keep coming up, these AR-15 style rifles, time and again in so many of these cases.
Well, I mean, assault weapons can kill a lot of people in a very short period of time, but the solution is not as simple as just getting rid of assault weapons. I mean, I wish it was that simple, but it's not. This is very complicated, and a lot of things have to happen, but there needs to be some action taken on the part of the government. It may not all be all-inclusive, but they need to do something in order to at least get started making a difference in trying to minimize the opportunity for people to go in and do this. And just one last thing, Jim, you mentioned criminal charges. In my opinion, those officers have something far worse than dealing with criminal charges. They have to live with this. And to think that they stood by while those kids were in there dead and dying, that's a hell of a thing to have to live with. I'm sorry. And to me, that's probably the worst thing that they're going to have to face no matter what.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, thanks to all of you for all of those insights. We appreciate it. Just ahead, President Biden holding out hope that, quote, rational Republicans could move the needle on gun reform. So which Republicans might change their tune? That's next. This is a Situation Room special report.
Africa Avant-Garde, Saturday on CNN in association with Access Bank.
Redwood Materials is a sustainable battery materials company. So, we focus on, building a closed-loop ecosystem for lithium-ion batteries. We recycle old lithium-ion batteries of all different types, both automotive, but also consumer electronics. We take the materials out of those batteries, refine them, extract them, and then remanufacture them into new components that can go directly back into battery manufacture. So I see this eventually, going to be the vast majority of the materials that are going into batteries that will be recycled in the future. Batteries are amazing because they are so recyclable. More than 90% of the materials, those critical materials in the battery, can be reused many, many times without degradation. I think people are really realizing the benefits of having a high recycled material content, both in terms of the environmental footprint of the batteries, but also the cost of those materials.
everywhere that there are people, they can be exploited. And it is the most profitable form of business today. And in my opinion, the most evil form. My name is Jeannie Mai Jenkins. I'm a television personality and the executive producer of Surviving Sex Trafficking. And I'm talking to you from Atlanta. Surviving Sex Trafficking is a documentary that follows the lives of 5 survivors who are able to tell us about their traumatizing situation with sex trafficking. The dangerous thing is trafficking doesn't happen instantaneously. It's a process. It's a process of building a relationship with somebody, building trust. And trafficking preys on people's dreams. Every single one of us have dreams. And trafficking finds a way to learn what your dreams are, and that trafficker preys on what your dream is and then gives you an exchange or some type of promise through either a relationship or love or affection or money in order for you to make your dreams come true. And that's why our film is intended to educate you, to inspire you through the lives of these survivors, but more than anything, tell you the stories of these 5 women who were trafficked in very different ways and how it could happen to anybody you know as well.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore CNN.com/impact. Click to take action.
President Biden was met by chants of "do something" by a crowd in Uvalde, Texas yesterday. He responded by saying, "We will." Just some remarkable video there from the scene when the president was on the ground trying to comfort some of the victims' families there. CNN's Phil Mattingly joins us live from the White House. Phil, that must have been just an intense moment for the president and the First Lady. Have any Republicans said that they're open now, though, to new gun control legislation? Because that might potentially be a game changer.
Yeah, an incredibly poignant and potentially powerful moment, but one that still leaves the question of will anything happen? Jim, to your question, Republicans have made clear they're willing to come to the table. At least some Republicans, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, saying one of his point people, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, should get into negotiations with Democrats. Whether or not they will entertain any ideas and actually vote for them, that is still an unanswered question, and that creates a problem for the White House and also helps explain why the president has been very careful not to demand specific legislative items and ideas. He's also made clear, though, he can't do anything without Republicans. Take a listen.
Oh, I know I have to, but there's a Constitution. I can't dictate this stuff. I can do the things I've done, and any executive action I can take, I'll continue to take. But I can't outlaw a weapon. I can't change the background check. I can't do that.
And Jim, despite years of failures when it comes to gun restrictions, new gun laws, because of Republican opposition, the president striking some tone of optimism, saying he believes there are some Republicans who realize, quote, the country just can't go on like this. Whether those Republicans actually come to the table and try and push something over the finish line, that remains to be seen. One thing to keep an eye on, Senator John Cornyn, a Texas Republican, said a group of bipartisan senators will be meeting via Zoom tomorrow. The negotiations continuing. Jim?
All right, it's been Lucy in the football so many times on this issue. Phil, it's been a weekend of grief and reflection for President Biden, ending in today's Memorial Day events. What did he say? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it really has. Obviously, the president commemorating Memorial Day, having a private breakfast with Gold Star families, those who've lost their men and women in their service. He also traveled to Arlington National Cemetery, laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, giving remarks underscoring the both pain and pride that those families feel in this moment, and also taking a look at his own son. Beau Biden, 7 years ago today, died. Now, Beau obviously served in the Delaware National Guard, died of brain cancer after he came home from Iraq. The president actually saw Beau Biden's grave earlier today in Delaware. That's where he started his day before coming here to commemorate Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery and the White House, Jim.
All right, yes, Memorial Day is personal to this president. Phil Mattingly, thank you very much. Just in, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wants to cap the market on guns in his country, announcing a new bill that would mean Canadians would no longer be able to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns, quote, anywhere in Canada. Pretty remarkable development. Let's bring in Congressman Colin Allred, a Democrat from Texas. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us. What goes through your mind when you see Canada taking a step like this towards a handgun freeze. One thing that we've seen time and again, and we've been talking about this over the last several days, when other countries experience mass shootings, like the one we saw in Texas, they pass gun laws and they end up having an effect. What do you make of that, and what took place in Canada?
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with the specifics of that law, but I am familiar with the way democracies are supposed to work. They're supposed to be responsive to the concerns of their constituents. And one of the top concerns for Americans of every stripe, particularly for parents, I've got 2 kids. This last week has been so tough for parents. It's been an act of mass trauma around the country, everybody hugging their babies a little bit more tightly. In a democracy, when you have a problem like that, you're supposed to respond with legislation that protects lives, that takes appropriate steps consistent with your Constitution or with your laws. We obviously have been unable to do that in this country. But you were right what you said earlier. It has been loosey with the football with our Republican colleagues. After an event like what happened in Uvalde, they'll say they want to do something, but then they end up not actually helping us and joining us in trying to pass that legislation.
Well, let me ask you about that, because Texas Senator John Cornyn, a Republican, is now involved in bipartisan talks on gun control and says he'll try to, quote, meet my colleagues across the aisle halfway. What does halfway look like in this Congress? I mean, they can't get anywhere on this issue, it seems, because we haven't seen gun control legislation pass in years.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say that it's not going to happen. I really don't, because I'm hopeful. Like every American, I'm hopeful that Senator Cornyn, that we can find 10 Republican senators in the United States Senate who will join our Democratic senators trying to do something to save lives. The House of Representatives will pass whatever they're able to get through the Senate. Even though it might not be everything that we want to do, we are more than willing to meet them halfway. But we have to have a partner. It takes 2 to tango. And so I really hope that Senator Cornyn, particularly after the rash of shootings that we've had in our state, here in Texas, that he is serious about this. And this is not just some attempt to allow the anger and the pain of this to dissipate until they no longer have to act.
And your state of Texas has been loosening gun restrictions on a state level over the past several years. Do you have any hope that this massacre will prompt Texans to rethink the issue of gun control?
I don't have much hope in our statewide leadership. They immediately were on television in the hours after Uvalde's, this crisis in Uvalde. They were immediately on television saying that they weren't going to do anything to restrict guns. They are all going directly and using the same talking points around mental health as if they've done anything to expand mental health in this state. We haven't expanded Medicaid. We have the highest uninsured rate in the country. They're, in my opinion, have done a lot to undermine our ability to treat mental health. But I don't have a lot of faith in our statewide elected leaders right now. But I also, as I said earlier, I do have faith in Texans. I have faith in Americans. I have faith in our democracy. And, when I was in the NFL, if we had a game, we lost that game, we reviewed the tape afterwards, and we had accountability. We said, you got to fix this. And if you didn't fix it, then we found someone else who would. That's how our politics should work, too. We've had a crisis. We've had terrible things happen. If we don't fix it, then let's get someone else in there who can.
And this country is clearly on edge right now, Congressman. I want to show you this some video, this scene of panic at the Barclays Center in New York. And this was over a false alarm of a shooting over the weekend. But people inside thought it was the real thing, and they were scrambling and running for cover, and it was frightening for the people who were there. What does it say that so many Americans fear that they could be next, that this could happen in their community?
Well, that's what I mean about this being, these school shootings being acts of mass trauma. My kids are little, they're 3 and 1, but their daycare has increased security this week because people were worried about a copycat event. A gun was found in a car at a high school in my district that had the school locked down and had everybody panicking. Americans are on edge, and they're on edge because they don't know if it's going to be their place of worship, a mall, a concert, their children's school. They don't know where it's going to happen, but they know any place that people gather could be the next site of one of these mass shootings. And it doesn't have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. Other countries don't experience this. We don't have higher levels of mental illness in the United States, and I don't think we're inherently more violent. We have laws that have made it too easy to get access to these weapons, and we have not done enough to keep them out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have them.
And we had a rash of shootings over the weekend in a variety of cities across the country. As we were talking about at Uvalde, other communities were dealing with this. There you see it on screen right now: Pittsburgh, Chicago, Chattanooga, Oklahoma, Henderson, Nevada. It just keeps happening and happening and happening, and we just don't do anything about it. Congressman Allred, maybe this time will be different. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Coming up, President Biden is now ruling out sending Ukraine weapons that could strike inside Russia. Will that make a difference in who wins this war?
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
Tag Heuer Monaco is one of the most iconic designs to have ever come from the Tag Heuer brand. And matter of fact, Heuer was the parent brand before it was bought and ultimately became Tag Heuer in the later part of the 1980s. The Monaco is very interesting because it's a timepiece that is closely associated with racing, and as well as the actor Steve McQueen, who wore a Monaco in the 1971 racing film Le Mans. The earliest Monaco is a reference called the 1133, and specifically Steve McQueen wore the 1133B, and the B stands for blue. So the Monaco, at least the one that McQueen wore, is a blue dial. The watch itself is very iconic, but it's also striking from a perspective of design, but also functionality.
World Sport.
World Sport.
For World Sport, I'm Coy Wire.
I'm Amanda Davis.
I'm Andy Scholes.
I'm Don Riddell.
I'm Alex Thomas. I'm Patrick Snell. And this
is CNN.
I'm Patrick Ottman in Havana, Cuba. And this is CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Paula Hancock in Seoul. This is CNN.
Tonight we're getting new reports of fierce fighting in eastern Ukraine as Russian forces are trying to break through Ukrainian defense positions. CNN senior international correspondent Matthew Chance joins us live from Kyiv. Matthew, Ukraine says Russia is attacking with maximum intensity. Give us the latest.
Yeah, that's right. Maximum intensity in that northeastern corner of the country around the city of Severodonetsk, which is really the most easternmost holdout of Ukrainian forces in the country. Fierce fighting in the streets taking place in that city as Russian forces make slow but significant progress to take hold of that area. There's fighting elsewhere as well in the region, particularly in the south east of the country, where Ukrainian forces say they've launched a counterattack against the Russians to try and push them back out of territory they captured some months ago. They say they've had some success in that, killing dozens of Russian troops and destroying several Russian armored vehicles as well. The way to stop the fighting, or at least to turn the tide in the northeast where Russia is making these gains, the Ukrainians say, is for the United States to step up and to provide long-range artillery systems that the Ukrainians say they need to hit back at the long-range attacks they're coming under from Russia. But of course, President Biden earlier today saying that he would not provide Ukraine with weapons that were capable of hitting Russia. Not ruling it out completely, but at the moment it looks like the Americans are holding back from that long-range deployment.
Yeah, he certainly sounds cool on that idea. Matthew, there is growing speculation around Vladimir Putin's health. Interesting that the Kremlin weighed in on this. What did the Kremlin have to say about this today?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, there's been a lot of speculation about Vladimir Putin's health for the past several weeks or even months, when he was seen sort of gripping a desk when he was at a meeting with the defense minister, looking very uncomfortable. And there's been all sorts of speculation about what could be wrong with him, particularly amongst the critics of the Kremlin, who are perhaps, a certain amount of wishful thinking that, he could be subject to some sort of grave illness that would sort of end the problem of Russia, as it were. Look, I mean, the Russian Foreign Ministry today has stepped in, the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, saying that, look, there's basically restating this idea, there's nothing wrong with Vladimir Putin. Sane people in the, to paraphrase Sergei Lavrov, can see that there's nothing wrong with him. He appears on television all the time. And I have to say, despite all this circling rumor about his health, there's not very much substantial in these suggestions that there's something gravely wrong with the Russian president. But I expect we'll see.
Possibly a lot of wishful thinking, I guess. All right, Matthew Chance, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Joining me now is the former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Ambassador Taylor, thanks so much. How hard is it for the Ukrainians to fight back in the eastern Donbass region amid this brutal bombardment? It just doesn't seem to let up.
Jim, you're exactly right. The Russians now can use their artillery, and that's what they've been doing. They've been bombarding cities. And Matthew mentioned Severodonetsk. They've just been bombarded mercilessly with long-range artillery, even with other kinds of thermobaric bombs, which will push the Ukrainian soldiers out of their bunkers. So they're using just the Russians are using brutal tactics. And after they have bombarded these cities, then they can gradually move forward. So that's what's happening. But Matthew's also right. When the Russians are concentrating so hard around Severodonetsk, that means they have to leave other parts of the front less defended. And so the Ukrainians are pushing back, are counterattacking in the south. They're counterattacking in the north. So there's a real battle going on. But there's no doubt that the Russians are moving forward. It's a grim time for the Ukrainians.
And having said that, President Biden is weighing sending a rocket system to Ukraine, but potentially holding back on the longer range weapons that could hit inside Russia. Help us sort that out, Ambassador. Why would the president be saying that? What factors are at play when Ukraine says its fate rests on having these weapons?
Jim, the Ukrainians have been urging the Americans and other NATO allies to provide this MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems. Now, these MLRS systems can fire some projectiles long distances, 300 miles. Other of the same system can shoot missiles 28 miles. My understanding is that the United States has decided, the government has decided, the administration has decided to provide MLRS to the Ukrainians in the short-range version. Short-range version, 28 miles, that's still going to give the Ukrainians what they need in terms of going after the artillery that the Russians are using in the east. What the Ukrainians are not getting, apparently, are the 300-mile version of the MLRS. And those, of course, the 300-mile version would go well into Russia. The Ukrainians don't need that. The Ukrainians are not interested in attacking Russia. The Ukrainians are interested in MLRS because of the volume of fire that it brings on the Russian troops and Russian artillery in their country, in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are going to get what they need.
Got it. And as the former ambassador to Ukraine, what do you make of these comments coming from the Russian foreign minister? Pretty interesting, swatting down rumors about Vladimir Putin's health. You know, we can't put much stock in anything the Kremlin says, but what do you make of that?
That they have to deny it tells us something, but you're exactly right, Jim. You cannot believe or put any faith in what Minister Lavrov says. I mean, or President Putin for that matter. We remember that they swore to us that they weren't going to invade Ukraine. They mocked people that were suggesting that was going to happen, and of course they invaded Ukraine.
All right, former Ambassador Bill Taylor, I suspect we will not be shying away from that subject in the future. I suspect we'll be coming back. Ambassador, good to talk to you. We appreciate it. Just ahead.
Good to talk to you, Jim.
All right, good to talk to you. Just ahead, the school district police chief who decided not to immediately confront the Texas gunman. We're taking a look at his record and new fallout he's facing nearly a week after the massacre.
We try to be global and we try to be smart. And we try very hard to get both of those every week. But I want to hear authentic voices of people who are passionate or intelligent about a subject, who will make you smarter, move you emotionally, who will kind of challenge your mind or move your heart, and that's the consistency that we try to get at.
Fareed Zakaria, GPS, Sundays on CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
I'm Jenny Wassenaar, Chief Sustainability Officer at 3VM Packaging. Sustainability is an imperative for any business. If you look at the footprint of your organization, you have to make sure that by 2050 latest, you're at zero emissions. This is important for the Earth, it's important for future generations, but it's also important for your employees. So I'm expecting that businesses that do not focus on sustainability, that they will not be around for a very long time. Of course, this looks a bit like a threat, but it's actually not. It's a great opportunity for companies to embrace sustainability, take sustainability in your DNA, and make a future career and success for your business out of sustainability.
to open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of a camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
It's so great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest.
I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them?
Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair.
It was an unprecedented move, very eerie. All the roads have been closed off.
Describe the scene that you arrived to.
The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying.
Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now? Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest. We continue to monitor the government in crisis.
This was the Duchess's first news interview.
Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about.
Max Foster, CNN.
We're getting new information about a key figure in the delayed police response to the Texas school shooting. The chief of the police department for the Uvalde School District reportedly will not be sworn in tomorrow as a member of the city council as originally planned. That's according to CNN affiliate KSAT. CNN's Nick Watt has more on Chief Pete Arredondo and the fallout he's facing.
I do believe that this is absolutely one of the worst police failures in modern U.S. history. Those defenseless children in those classrooms had nothing. They were relying on the police.
But the police were waiting outside the classrooms, treating this not as an active shooter, but as a barricaded suspect situation.
For the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that.
So the killer was inside a school filled with children for over an hour before he was stopped dead, and not before he murdered Alfredo Garza's daughter, Amory Jo.
They needed to act immediately, you know? There's kids involved, you know, there's a gun involved.
Officials say this man made the decision not to go in. Chief Pedro Pete Arredondo of the Uvalde School District, PD.
Safety measures were taken to make sure that we had a safe release for the rest of the district, throughout our city of Uvalde.
A pair of brief appearances in the hours after the slaughter, and Chief Arredondo hasn't been seen by the press since.
As far as his employment status is concerned, that's something that is beyond my control and I have no knowledge about.
Could lives have been saved? Fewer kids shot? Injured kids treated earlier and survived? That remains unclear. There was an initial burst of fire, then a lull during which kids inside called 911 pleading for help, then more shots, seemingly directed at a door.
We could have saved some of those kids. That's what I believe. You go in.
A 50-year-old Uvalde native, Arredondo was approved as chief by the school board in 2020. At the time, the super said they were impressed by his experience, knowledge, and community involvement with, they said, 27 years in law enforcement at another school district in Laredo, Texas, and here in the city of Uvalde Police Department. In March, Arredondo posted about active shooter training at the Uvalde High School.
That doctrine requires officers. Every officer lines up, stacks up, goes and finds where those rounds are being fired at and keeps shooting until the subject is dead, period.
So Arredondo's decision went against established active shooter doctrine and, we're told, against the facts on the ground.
From what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can.
And Jim, you mentioned that Chief Arredondo was elected earlier in May to the city council in Uvalde. KSAT of San Antonio reports that the special session, the swearing-in session, will not take place tomorrow. The mayor saying that the focus is going to be on the family. Now, KSAT reporter Dylan Collier also tweeted a statement from the mayor that reads in part, Pete Arredondo was duly elected to the city council. There's nothing in the city charter, election code, or Texas Constitution that prohibits him from taking the oath of office. To our knowledge, we are currently not aware of any investigation of Mr. Arredondo. Jim?
You got to wonder whether he's rethinking whether he should be serving the community in that capacity. All right, Nick Watt, thank you very much. Coming up, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband arrested over the weekend in Napa Valley. New details on what happened next. Stick with us.
this place we all belong.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
Welcome to The Lead. We begin with breaking news. The United States has plunged into a recession. We're seeing infections at an all-time high. What's your reaction to that? Here are the facts.
The Lead with Jake Tapper.
I'm Will Ripley in Taipei, Taiwan, and this is CNN.
Turning now to Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi isn't saying much after the news of her husband's DUI arrest in Napa Valley broke over the weekend. CNN's Jessica Dean joins us live from the Capitol with more details. Jessica, what led up to Paul Pelosi's arrest?
Well, we're learning some new details. This happened apparently late Saturday night in Napa Valley, California, and we're told by Napa Valley County officials or Napa County officials that Mr. Pelosi was attempting to cross a Napa County highway, and that's when another car struck his car. There were no injuries, and the driver of the other car was not charged, but Mr. Pelosi was charged with driving with a blood alcohol content of 0.08 or higher. He was arrested. We're told he was released on a $5 $5,000 bail early Sunday morning. As for Speaker Nancy Pelosi, her spokesperson said that she will not be commenting on what they call a personal matter, and also pointed out Speaker Pelosi was not with her husband at the time. Rather, she was on the East Coast. Jim, we know that she was giving a commencement address at Brown University over the weekend. The two have been married since 1963. Jim.
Jessica Dean, thank you very much. Turning back to the horrific school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, causing an avalanche of calls for change from community leaders and politicians. Now athletes and coaches are even speaking up. CNN's Brian Todd joins us now. Brian, how are the athletes using their celebrity status to demand change?
Well, Jim, they're using their notoriety, their power in the community, and their access to media to call for change. And in the case of one NBA coach, drawing from very powerful, personal, and painful experience.
Since we left shoot-around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here.
Steve Kerr set the tone just hours after 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered in Uvalde, Texas. The Golden State Warriors coach, who had a crucial playoff game that night, wasn't about to talk basketball.
When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of the, I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough.
Late last week, San Francisco Giants manager Gabe Kapler decided to take his own personal stand against gun violence regarding a pregame tradition.
I don't plan on coming out for the anthem going forward until I feel I feel better about the direction of our country.
Kapler said on his blog, quote, "Every time I place my hand over my heart and remove my hat, I'm participating in a self-congratulatory glorification of the only country where these mass shootings take place." Kapler did stand for the national anthem ahead of his team's game today because of Memorial Day. The New York Yankees, a team so mindful of tradition that it won't allow its players to have beards, have taken their own action. Last Thursday, while their teams competed against each other on the field, the Yankees and Tampa Bay Rays organizations used their social media accounts to post messages and facts about gun violence in the U.S. The NBA's Miami Heat, in the midst of an intense playoff run, urged fans to contact their lawmakers about gun law reform.
At their heart, they are members of a community. Athletes and coaches, managers are members of a community. And if their community is hurting, those are their fans. Those are the people who watch and cheer for them.
In Steve Kerr's case, it gets personal.
But I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this.
Kerr does know the feeling. His father, Malcolm, president of the American University of Beirut, was assassinated by gunmen in 1984 when Steve Kerr was a freshman in college. Even at a moment as unique as this, can sports figures make any difference in the gun debate?
If that just gives it a little nudge, maybe that can help. But I don't think any of us is a Pollyanna here, and assuming that just because a few athletes, coaches, managers' voices are heard, that teams are doing things on social media, that by itself is going to change things.
But Christine Brennan says top sports figures can make a difference if they take further steps, if they go to legislatures, if they appear in PSAs on TV, if they speak in schools. The challenge for them, she says, is to stay focused on the issue beyond the days immediately after mass shootings. Jim, we'll see what comes in the months ahead with these sports figures.
Important story. Brian Todd, thank you very much, and we'll have more news just ahead.